Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's probably more than I deserve, but Trent is right. I have been in the litigation support industry for just about 30 years at this point. Kind of scary. Scarier yet is lots changed in that 30 years, but what we're going to explore today is the possibility of more change. So I think this what ServeNow and ServeCon are doing here today is pretty cool. And what I'm hoping to do is have you rethink your business a little bit, and hopefully you can come away from this presentation being more successful. I'm also hopeful that this program is more than an educational opportunity, but it serves as an example of what is possible for, and I'm hoping that associations like CalsPro and NAPS see this as an opportunity for them to leverage technology and add value for their customers. All right, so let's get started here. Don't think like a process server. Why thinking like an entrepreneur might be more important. So here's my agenda. I've got 7 things to run through here. What is a process server? What is an entrepreneur? A lesson from the Girl Scouts. I think you might enjoy that one. Game-changing events. Abandon your existing business model. Incumbents. And what would a smart, creative entrepreneur do? So here we go. No doubt there's been a lot of change in the litigation support industry. We've seen price competition, the commoditization of service or process, more compliance requirements. Certainly change is here to stay. We'll explore these challenges that are facing the process serving industry and also explore how we might be able to utilize technology and the entrepreneurial spirit to help us thrive in the new normal. So as part of this conversation or presentation, I'm asking you to challenge yourself a little bit. Perhaps take your process serving hat off or your preconceived notions for a moment and being open to exploring new ideas. Part of what I'm going to present here are not all my original ideas, but really a mix of ideas and concepts that I've gleaned from others over the years. Several of the concepts that I'll share at the end of the presentation were specifically influenced by a book I recently read. That book is How Google Works. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. It certainly resonated with me. So here we go. What is a process server? Well, most of you watching probably think, gosh, that's a silly question. I am a process server. Why is Jeff asking that question? Well, if you were to ask someone off the street, or better yet, a smart, creative entrepreneur, they might look at you sideways when you explain what we do. So what do we do? Well, among other things, we ensure one's due process rights to notice are upheld. Some of you, if asked this question, might explain how we do what we do rather than why a process server is important. I'll suggest to you that if you were to ask a smart, creative entrepreneur, they'd quickly realize the importance of our role, but they would also see a tremendous opportunity to transform how we do what we do by leveraging technology and challenging the status quo. Thought I'd add a quick story here as it relates to what is a process server. I this morning recalled the first time I was asked what a process server was, and at the time I happened to be in 2nd grade. For those of you who know me know I'm 2nd generation process server. So it was show and tell day, and the teacher asked me, what does your dad do? And I said, well, he's a process server. Well, what is that? Frankly, I had no idea. So I literally explained to my classmates and my teacher that my father surfed papers. So imagine surfing in Malibu with papers. I don't know what I was thinking, but that's what I said. So I thought I'd share that little story. All right, next slide. What if you were to ask lawyers about process servers? How might they answer? Would they say that we add value? Do they value the service that we perform? Or do they see us as a necessary evil? Perhaps some see us as an integral part of the legal community. So I would suspect that if you were to ask lawyers, many would simply say all they're really looking for is a trusted legal support professional that provides them with peace of mind. There might be others that say, hey, I don't really care, just get the service done at all costs. And perhaps even others that would suggest that they want their process servers without process servers even being a part of the equation. Point is, the answer might be different depending upon who you ask. So let's jump into what is an entrepreneur. Well, they know when to pivot. They're not married to the status quo. They understand and embrace the concept that they either have a seat at the table or they're on the menu. What's that mean? Well, for me it means they don't wait for change to happen to them. They make change work for them. They don't think problem, they think opportunity. They certainly think big, or even big times 10. I'll suggest to you that many in our industry are probably not thinking this way. And so I asked myself, how many entrepreneurs would invest in a process serving business today? Again, I think the answer is probably not too many. But I do believe that there are many savvy entrepreneurs among us that might see an industry that can be radically transformed. That person would need to be somebody that's not encumbered by the existing culture, but rather feels free to challenge the status quo. If somebody like that is out there, then I suggest that it's time for us to look out. Progress. Well, it may sound retro to say the digital age has arrived. It's been here a while. But the service of process, I think we all recognize, is deeply rooted in practices from the 19th and 20th century. So, is that progress? Well, not so much if you ask me. I'd submit, if you were to ask our law firm customers what progress looked like, they'd probably see it a bit differently than your typical process server. Rest assured that our industry is going to undergo tremendous pressure to change and will be transformed in the next several years. So the question is, are you an agent for change, or are you a doubting Thomas? Reinvent yourself. If the process serving industry never existed, how would you invent it today? I submit that you probably wouldn't invent it quite the way that it exists now. That if you were an entrepreneur looking at a court filing or process serving business, you'd be more flexible in your thinking and your approach to building a great business. I think it is time to start to reinvent ourselves. And I'll suggest to you that if you're not acting like a startup, it might be time to start over. All right, my little picture out of the way here. Here we go. All right, so Girl Scouts get it. Do you? So I don't know how many people know, I didn't know, frankly, until recently, that the Girl Scouts have gone e-commerce. The smartest Girl Scouts out there have put together a Girl Scout cookie page, fully online, pick Thin Mints, tag-alongs, whatever you want, put your credit card in, and they're shipped to your house. Frankly, it doesn't get any easier than that. Point is, they've gone online. Have you? I suspect that most of you probably haven't. I think there's very few of us that are fully online, meaning customer acquisition, customer sign-up, training, support, sales, fulfillment, all online. I suspect there's not too many of us that are there yet. But if you're not focusing on getting to that state of doing business over the next 5 years, I think you run the risk of becoming irrelevant. Now, if you want to do things the old-fashioned way, there's still several clever ways to do that. I'll show you one of those clever ways here. So here's a clever Girl Scout in San Francisco who's decided to set up her cookie store in front of the medical marijuana dispensary. I think I see 7 or 8 boxes under that table there. Frankly, that's probably not going to be enough. I'm hoping she has a cargo van. All right, that was my attempt at humor. Hopefully it didn't fall flat. Game-changing events. All right, so I think we all recognize that everything is going online, and there's no reason to believe that process serving should be the exception. I think our customers expect technology to make everything easier, and we're not going to be immune from the transformation. We need to change with the times and remain agile. So how is the changing ecosystem impacting your business in 2015 and beyond? Well, I think we all recognize that there's shrinking demand for process servers. An example of that is collection and foreclosure cases are down by 40% or more in many markets. I saw a stat recently in Texas that said that civil cases were down better than 17%. So that's not even counting collection and foreclosure cases. So the need for process servers appears to be shrinking. Alternative methods of service appear to be gaining momentum. Courts are now taking an interest and having an active role in the service of civil process. And e-filing, if you're a physical filing business, is probably having an impact as well. I think we all recognize that's a lot of change, and the pace at which change is happening is getting faster. And then the forces driving those changes, I don't think, are going to lessen. If time allows, at the end of this session, what I'm hoping to do is spend a few minutes and talk to you about this bullet point here: courts taking an active interest in the service of civil process. I suspect there's not too many of you know what's going on along those lines, so I think we'll have some time at the end. I'll cover that. Trent, remind me if I forget. There's a few other examples of how the landscape is shifting. Virginia, you've got certain scenarios under which electronic service of primary documents can be sent to corporations. You've got true electronic notaries in Virginia. I don't know if you know, but just like we're talking on a webcam here, in Virginia, as long as you're following the right specifications and rules, notaries can notarize somebody's affidavit or document without them physically being present and physically signing that document in front of them. That's a radical change from what exists in most other states. In Kansas, you can electronically serve wage garnishments, so there are large employers that have opted into this program that allow the sheriff to send wage garnishments to them electronically. They acknowledge them, they go back and forth electronically. No need for the sheriff or process server to even be involved. In Utah, they've taken a pretty novel step. They actually created a form for alternative forms of service. So if you can demonstrate in Utah that you've exhausted all other forms of service, you simply fill out this form, say, hey, here's all my efforts, and you literally check a box saying, I want to serve the defendant by Twitter or Facebook or some other platform. Submit it to the court, and they're likely to grant you the ability to serve by other than traditional means. North Carolina is probably the first state. I know there's a few others now that, in addition to publishing in the newspaper, summons and complaints where service was not affected by traditional means are being done online. I'd argue that's certainly more effective than sitting in the newspaper for 6 weeks or so. Once it's online, it's out there forever. I think we're all familiar with Rule 4. And then this was what I was talking about earlier, limited electronic service of process. Again, if we have time at the end, we'll dive into this a little bit further. But basically, this is an effort by the state courts to establish national standards for electronic service of process that the courts facilitate. You know, these and other examples really are fairly typical of what's going on and are threatening our long-held established ways of serving process. So change is creeping into our codes and rules, and we need to be aware if we're going to remain relevant. All right. Dude, where's my business? I recently wrote a blog post on this one, so I thought I'd include it in this presentation for those of you that may not have read it. But my version basically is, let me back up. Dude, where's my business is sort of a takeoff on Dude, where's my car? I don't know how many of you guys remember that movie or even saw it. But so the bottom line is, what's going on here is you've got a lawyer blogger and his contributors who have put together this social media subpoena guide. And this guide provides details on how to subpoena social media companies and other online platforms. Not surprisingly, many of the entities that are being subpoenaed that are outlined in this guide publish how they prefer to be served. And as an example, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Pinterest, Craigslist, and others all have indicated that they prefer to be served with a subpoena by other than traditional means. Amazon even takes it a step further and tells you exactly how to issue your subpoena, where to issue your subpoena, and exactly how to send it to them. They want it only by certified mail. That doesn't mean if a process server shows up, they won't take it. But this is how the recipients prefer to interact with subpoenas. And then the bottom of the screen here, this AT&T screenshot. I think some of you may have seen this one before. I took a screenshot of the AT&T online subpoena request. Essentially, you walk through their web page there. You tell them what you're looking for. You print out a page, and then you fax that page along with your subpoena to AT&T's intake number, and off you go. Needless to say, we're not a part of that equation. So, again, where's my business going? It's going digital, it's going online, and it's going to require a savvy entrepreneur, people to think outside the box a bit in order to figure out how we embrace change and make it work for us. So, another example of change and innovation, and frankly, are we keeping pace with the digital revolution? I'm not so sure we are. What you have on the screen here is a Radio Shack ad. This ad is from 1991, and if you look closely, it's probably hard to see on your screen. Virtually every single item that was on sale that President's Day weekend in 1991 can now be performed by the smartphone that's sitting in your pocket or your purse. And frankly, if you'd have bought everything in 1991, you'd spent several $1,000s for all those things. Heck, you can practically get a phone for free if you sign the right contract, and it'll do all these things and more better. So again, the pace at which things are changing and the level of innovation that's going on around us is tremendous. And we need to figure out how, as process servers, to capitalize on the innovation and change that's happening around us. So that brings me to my first question. Actually, not my first question. I think it's my third question. But is it time to abandon our existing business model? That might seem radical, but I think it's a question that we ought to be asking ourselves. But really, I would submit the answer to that question lies in the answer to a more important question. What does the process server in the year 2015 need to do or change to be successful in 5 years, the year 2020? If you think our industry is going to remain the same over the next 5 years, then stick with what you're doing. But if you think our industry is going to transform, you need to start planning for that end state. Meaning, what do you think it's going to look like in 5 years? And you essentially need, in my opinion, to start reverse engineering your business so that you are relevant 5 years from now. Perhaps it's even past time to start rethinking your business model. Now, I'm not saying that process serving is dying, but I am saying if you stick to your existing game plan that assumes nothing's going to change, your business is going to continue to erode. If you're not constantly challenging yourselves to make your products and services better, then I think you're doomed to just getting by. here's a few examples of entities or industries that failed to make the change. So you see Tower Records there, and they're going out of business sale. Blockbuster closing store. There's a little graph there showing how advertising's been impacted since newspapers and magazines and print media have fallen out of favor. And then there's another little screenshot there of wired phones. The common theme amongst these companies or industries is they all failed to pivot timely, or pivot at all in some instances. They either didn't believe or didn't recognize how content was going to be delivered in the future was going to change. I submit that process serving and court filing businesses are really no different. Those entities that will erode the quickest typically are going to be committed to fighting change rather than embracing it, and rather than making it work for them. Those entities are what is called incumbents. So what's an incumbent? Well, I think the taxi industry is a perfect example of what incumbents typically do when challenged. And I also think it's an example of what they are doing is a losing strategy. So despite the hordes of lawyers, lobbyists, and protests that the taxi industry is putting forth, Uber and other ride-sharing platforms are winning. So why is that? Is it because they've got better lawyers and better political connections? I don't think so. I think they're winning because they're providing a service that's easy, convenient, and novel. And frankly, that's what consumers want based on results. So incumbents have a choice to make. They can continue to operate as they always have, existing in a world where technology is something to be used, not as a tool of transformation, but simply as a tool to optimize operational efficiencies and maximize profits. Well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. They don't use technology to anchor their daily agenda. They see it really as that interesting thing down the hall or in the next building. It's sort of something that they think they don't control. I believe incumbents believe that the impending disruption caused by competitors entering their market is something to be fought. They are building a moat, burying their head in the sand. Frankly, I think that approach is destined to fail. Really, the forces of disruption and technology are simply too powerful. As much as we would like, we can't stop customer choice and innovation in our industry. So, if you need more evidence, I think you need to let the data decide. So what's the data tell us? If we were to walk into a registered agent's office, really anywhere in the United States, I don't care if it's CT, CSC, or any of the other large players, you're going to quickly see the data. You'll quickly realize what the data is telling you. Essentially, what it is roughly half of all service-to-process transactions going to these organizations is being delivered by other than process servers. I'll submit to you that we're already losing. We're losing because our customers have found another way to get documents to these agents that doesn't involve us. And why is that? I think it's because we're too focused on what is or was or what we wish could be, rather than not what. Let me take that back. Not what we wish could be, but we're focused on what is or what was, rather than what could be. So I think to myself, if a Google executive were to walk into a typical process serving company, I think they'd be astonished that we still perform service of process going to businesses physically. And I think most people off the street would probably agree. But it's us who are so tied to our existing business model that think that's never going to happen. Well, I'm telling you, the data says it is happening. So another example of companies failing to pivot. Blockbuster versus Netflix. So as you can see on this slide, Blockbuster was a $6 billion company in the year 2004. And just 6 years later, 2010, they were bankrupt. Massive failure. They're a classic incumbent. They fought the future and they lost. Companies like Netflix really ate their lunch. Here's Netflix's stock portfolio from inception up through last week, or performance, not portfolio. So what this shows you is even if you are the newcomer and you're challenging incumbents, it's not without its challenges. You too need to continually innovate. So you can see Netflix was doing great, especially starting in 2010 up through 2011, about the same time that you saw the massive downturn for Blockbuster. But Netflix too was challenged and found themselves essentially in that incumbent position. So they had a painful decision to make. They could stick with what they were doing, or they could shift their focus away from delivering DVDs physically to streaming video. And as you can see on the graph, at first it didn't go well for them, but over the long term it worked out obviously very well. I think this could be a great example of what is going on in the process serving world, and unless we're willing to shift, we're going to see that massive decline or erosion in our business. So what does the 21st century process server or agency look like? Well, some might say it's that process server who's into gadgets. I'd be one of those guys who's running facial recognition on their Google Glass device to identify defendants at the door. That'd be kind of cool. Some might say it's that process server who's got drones with cameras and microphones and is using the drone to get to those hard-to-reach defendants. I know that one's a little bit of a stretch. But frankly, I'd suggest the process server of the future looks something like this. They're a disinterested third party that provides a reliable and secure transaction. They collect the data and the documents, they ensure compliance with all legal and technical requirements, and they test to the facts of the electronic transaction just like they do in the physical world. If we don't figure out how to look more like this, somebody else will, and frankly, I fear we'll be left behind. So again, do you have a seat at the table? Are you the menu? If you ask me, most in our industry are the meal and don't even know it yet. So which is it? I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Are you the eagle or the duck? So what would a smart creative entrepreneur do? This next section of the presentation, I'm going to focus on several actions that I think most entrepreneurs would agree play a critical role in their success. Unless, of course, you want to be that guy that continually buries his head in the sand and pretends nothing's changing. So here we go. Number one, review your products. What does that mean? Well, ask yourself, what is your value proposition, your technical insight or innovation upon which your customers are making a buying decision? If you can't clearly articulate a compelling answer, I think it's time to rethink your products and services. So, how many of you are familiar with the TV show Shark Tank? I know I am, so I don't miss an episode. I find it fascinating. But if you had to go on Shark Tank and pitch yourself or your business, how many investors would you get? I suspect the typical process serving agency would not get any. I think that's a great example for why you need to be rethinking what it is you do and how you do it. I'm not saying move away from process serving. I'm just saying be open to doing things differently and embrace change and make it work for you. Number two, or the second thing that entrepreneurs would typically do, is they look outside their industry for ideas they can apply. You might spot things that you can emulate, leverage, or learn from. But if you focus on what's going on in your industry, you run the risk of simply copying your competitors rather than providing value for your customer. Third thing you can do, for every decision you make, ask yourself, is what I'm doing having a positive and meaningful impact on my customer experience? If it's not, then knock it off. It's a waste of time. Number 4, I think most entrepreneurs would agree they have a strong desire to continually invest in personal development, the personal development of their staff. Make more time to read. At least for me, that has helped me tremendously. I think we all know there's literally thousands of books out there on the business and entrepreneurship and other related topics. Take the time to read. I listed a few books here that I've read recently. Frankly, I know running a business is very challenging, especially if you've got a family too. How do you find time to read? I use audiobooks. Whenever I'm in the car, whenever I'm on a plane, whenever I'm walking the dogs, I'm listening to books. I think I've managed to get through over 40 books in the last 12 months. Number 5, learn to recognize when to pivot. I think most of us would concede that massive change is afoot, but too many of us are unwilling to pivot with changing times. If we fail to proactively address the changes going around us, I think we're destined to follow in BlackBerry's and Kodak's shoes and suffer a Darwinian fate. He included the quote here, Darwin, some say he didn't say it. I haven't found anybody that says one way or the other for sure if he did, but I like it either way. Essentially, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable. Number 6, stay innovative in your industry. Well, how do you do that? Well, experiment with new ideas, not just new products and services, but how you fulfill those products and services. Find new ways to deliver results for your customers. I think they expect and deserve that. The other thing you should be doing is look into the future. All right, here's a shameless plug, sorry. Ask yourself, what changes do you expect in your industry in the next 5 years? Formulate a plan to ensure that your business is capitalizing on those changes that you expect. And then essentially project out 5 years and work your way back. Figure out, how do I get there? If you know the end state that you're aiming at, then I think you stand a chance of building a successful business going forward. Otherwise, I think you're going to be left to pick up the crumbs. Number 7, testing. Critically important. Whether you're considering new products, features, pricing models, whatever, continually test these ideas early and often before you fully launch them. Collect the data you need in order to make an informed decision about what resonates with your target customers. You need to closely monitor and determine quickly if what you're proposing is a hero or a zero. And frankly, failing is fine, as long as you do it quickly and you learn from those failures. Number 8, WWED. What would an entrepreneur do if they became an incumbent? Well, I think they'd reimagine their business and the value that they offer. And I think that's what we need to be doing. Number 9, add value every day. You know, what's that mean? Dr. Evil doesn't get it. Start each day by asking yourself, how am I going to add value to my organization? I've found when I declare at the beginning of the day what I hope to accomplish or how I intend to add value, I stand a better chance of being successful. And then at the end of the day, I do a quick review. Say, all right, how'd I do? And I either met my goals or expectations or I didn't, but I know what it was I was aiming for and how close I came at the end of every day. 10, Meetup. Networking. So number 10, networking might be one of the more important things that you can do as an entrepreneur. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Meetup, but Meetup's a platform, online platform, where you can go and find people organized around their interests. Frankly, any interest you can think of. Some of them are kind of scary, so don't go digging too deeply. But I typed in legal technology and innovation. What you see on the screen is just a small representation of the groups that I found in a second. You can refine the results by location, so you can say, hey, I'm in LA, or I want to see things that are, or groups that are 10 miles away from me, whatever. So again, this is just a small representation of what I found within a matter of moments. Most of these groups meet regularly. They publish their dates and times. These folks get together, network, share ideas, perhaps even work on projects together. These meetups are valuable for obvious reasons beyond sharing ideas, but they can also be an excellent place for you to recruit or find and recruit smart, creative people for your organization. Number 11, hiring. Hire the smartest and most creative people you can find or afford. They don't need to be from our industry. As a matter of fact, it might be better if they weren't from our industry. I think too many of us, myself at times, are guilty of only looking inside our industry when we're looking to fill a position. Frankly, I contend at this point that folks from outside our industry would be more likely to force you to challenge the status quo and remain or become innovative. So it's my contention that hiring is arguably the most important thing you can do to be successful. So a recap of the things that a smart entrepreneur would be doing: reviewing their products and services regularly, recognizing when to pivot, looking outside their industry for inspiration, commit to keep learning, they test and experiment regularly, they add value every day, they're open to reimagining their business, they network, and they commit to hiring smart, creative people. So, comments, questions, concerns? Want to tell me I'm crazy? Whatever, we can jump in here. Trent, I know that I asked you to remind me about what is limited electronic service of process and what the state courts are doing. So I think we still have a bunch of time. Is that right?
We have a little bit of time, probably 10 minutes total. So there's a couple questions that have come through.
Why don't we start with the questions, and then we'll see how much time we have left.
Okay, awesome. So the first question is, this person makes an assumption that there's 100,000 process servers in the country today. In your estimation, how many will there be in the year 2020?
Gosh, well, certainly don't have a crystal ball, and really haven't given that much thought. But frankly, I don't know. I don't think it would be unreasonable to assume that there would be far fewer in 2020 than there are today. And I think that those folks that embrace that entrepreneurial spirit will be the ones that will, remain relevant and successful going forward. So, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. And frankly, I don't even know if there's 100,000. Perhaps there's more, perhaps there's less. But I don't think it would be crazy to think that there might be as many as half of what we see today.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, can you give us some examples of how a small business process server can innovate?
Examples. Well, yeah, and I think part of that goes to really the recap of what I ended with is, focusing on reviewing your products. And so here's that recap page. Recognize that, it may be time to pivot. Certainly, you need to be online, and that doesn't mean have a website. And if you don't have a website today and you're a process serving business, you're either very lucky that you're still successful, or you're crazy. So certainly you need to be online. You need to provide your customers with the tools and services that they expect. Don't assume you know what they need. Go to your customers' offices, more than one. Collect empirical data. What are they looking for? What do they need? What would make their lives easier when working with a process serving agency? And frankly, let go of the status quo. If you honestly believe that in the year 2020 electronic service of process won't be here, then I wish you luck. But I think it will be. And I think there's going to be a handful of savvy entrepreneurs that figure out how to make this work for them. So I know that's a long answer, but be open to change. Listen to your customers and go out there and reinvent yourself.
A couple more questions that have rolled through, Jeff. The next one is, can you give us a real example of how you try to add value every day?
Well, it depends on what's going on. So, you know, I think for me, for those that you may not know, my role is sort of strategic development at our organization, and I work remotely from the rest of the executive team. So most of the folks are up in Northern California. I'm working out of my house, and so at times I feel somewhat disconnected from the mothership, if you will. So I think I have to work harder to find ways to demonstrate that I'm adding value than perhaps other people do, because they don't have the benefit of walking down the hall and having an exchange with my peer on a regular basis. So, you know, it may be something as simple as communicating better because I am remote. And so how do I do that? Well, I'll pick up the phone, video chat, go to meetings, essentially exchange ideas and concepts with my peers, check in with them. So there are a number of ways, but for me, the challenge of adding value is increased because I do work remotely from the mothership.
So the presentation as a whole, I think you touched on a lot of the topics that will be expanded upon today. And the one part that caught my eye, though, is made me go out and register a domain. I just registered droneserve.com. So no one, don't go look and see if that's available, because I got it. But there is a question related to that, and that is, sure, do you think drones will be used to serve papers just like FedEx will use them to deliver packages, or do you feel that people will receive documents through social media?
Yeah, so when I talked about drones serving papers, I'm really sort of half kidding. Frankly, I don't see it. Although, and I should have used it in this presentation, there was an application to a federal court, and I forget which one. I think it was the Central District in New York recently, where a lawyer applied to have the court grant him the ability to serve somebody via drone. So it was a large home, I think in the Hamptons, behind a gate, and there was simply no way for the process server to gain access. So they applied to the court, said, hey, we've got this drone operator, and it's got a camera and it's got a mic, and so all we want to do is have permission to fly over the fence, across the grounds, to when we think somebody's going to be outside, or hover over and wait for them, use the camera, and then release the document from this little attachment thing that they had and serve the paper. I don't remember, I'll have to go research, if the court granted that form of service. I don't think they did. But so that's the only example I'm aware of. No, I don't see drones playing a role in serving process. I am aware of a drone operator in Minnesota who delivers cases of beers to ice fishermen. So you're out there on the lake, it's frozen, you're in your little shack, you've run out of beer, get on your smartphone, order up your case of beer, and literally the drone comes out and delivers it. I don't know if the FAA approves that, but there is somebody who actually does that. So now I think we're really moving towards an electronic scenario that looks something like, let me find it, there it was, something like this. So we get a law firm who uses a user interface, who submits the documents to the electronic process server. The electronic process server sends that documents and data electronically versus to an API, might exist for a hospital, provides the information, there's an electronic handshake, and everything comes back to the end user or the law firm. There's no reason why this can't be done today. And at some level, AT&T, that slide I showed, is doing a very dumbed down version of this. But essentially, this is kind of what I see. And so it's my position that if electronic service process is going to exist, it needs to embrace the concept of waiver, consent, and notice of acknowledgement if it's going to be effective. Because the first thing that people are going to say is, well, email's no good. And frankly, I totally disagree. Every time I see electronic service on Facebook, I don't freak out. I just simply say, hey, there's another example. You need to recognize that it's only after all other forms of service have been exhausted. I can't honestly think that service via Facebook is going to become the norm one day. Gosh, I hope not. Hopefully Facebook isn't watching this and figuring out how to build a product to make that work.
I think this is a follow-up question, Jeff, to what you were just talking about. What if the party does not waive or consent to notice this way? Would you think that service by hand would be required?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Because technically there really are no rules on the book except for very few instances where electronic service of primary documents would be effective without the recipient acknowledging, consenting, or waiving their right to physical service. So, and that's why I threw the little process server down here. So here's the path you'd take if this path didn't work.
So we're getting more questions rolling in, but we're definitely running short on time. But we'll give it another 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
You bet.
Okay. Actually, I'll ask you a couple more questions because we do have to wrap it up. So I guess this is the last question. Please elaborate on your earlier comment that half of all service or process going to CT, CSC, NCR, et cetera, is affected by someone other than process servers.
Yeah, so I've had an opportunity to visit some of these locations and see what's actually going on behind the counter, and in some cases in front of the counter. Frankly, if you were to walk into CSC's office in California, most of the time you're not even going to interact with a human being. There's simply a crate or basket that sits outside of a window, like at a doctor's office, and you drop it in the basket and you knock on the window and Becky says, hey, I got it, and off you go. But if you go actually behind the window, what you're going to find is most of the process, approximately half, that comes into CT, CSC, and most of these other large registered agents, is being delivered by U.S. postal mail. And so you'll see a crate that has a date on it full of envelopes, and it's just first-class mail. And so these came in on the 23rd, and these came in on the 22nd, and then they just worked their way through them. And because there's no one that said it was delivered on a date certain, because it's just regular mail, they're able to work that backlog as they get to it. Another portion of what's coming in to these folks is overnight, FedEx, UPS, that sort of thing. They do get to those because they know there's a record. of when it was delivered. So they certainly get priority. But what you're going to see is half of the business that's coming into these places is being done by other than process server. So it's mail and it's and overnight. And I think that our customers have figured out that CT, CSC, and others really don't care how it gets to them. And I'm not sure their customers, frankly, care how it gets to them. So that's what happens. So you can spend $1 on an envelope or $15 on an overnight, and I think we're fortunate that we still have business going to registered agents.
Well, thanks, Jeff, and I'm sorry to everyone who still has questions out there. Jeff, how can, if these folks want to send you an email with their questions regarding your presentation, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so the best email to reach me is pretty simple. It's Jeff, Jeff, at, and my last name, karotkin.com. So.
Likewise, you can send an email to any of the ServeNow email addresses that you have, info, sales, help at. I receive all of those, so I'll make sure that they get directed to Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much. This was an amazing presentation, and thank you for joining us today at ServeCon.